I'm very excited to be joined by documentary film director Joshua Seftel, who's been working for 3 decades on films that really make a difference and create change. This is his second Oscar nominated documentary short, All the Empty Rooms. I was really moved by watching it, and I'm so thankful to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Can you take us back to the first moment, the call from Steve Hartman about documenting empty bedrooms and what you saw in that cinematically, emotionally, that made you say, yes, I think this should be a film?
Sure. Yeah. So Steve Hartman, who's a CBS News reporter, he's known as the good news guy. Like he's the guy at the end of the broadcast who does those really uplifting stories. He reached out to me 3 years ago. He called me. It was actually the day after the 2023 Oscars. He had seen me the night before on the broadcast because we had a film nominated that year called Stranger at the Gate. I had known Steve from another lifetime, from 25 years ago, when we actually worked together for about a year at CBS. And I was making documentaries at the time. They brought me in to work with him. And then I went back to documentaries right after that. And he reached out and he said, I've been following your career, and project I think could maybe be a documentary. And then he explained to me that he had written a letter to every single family who had lost a child to school shooting since Sandy Hook. And that in that letter, he said, I want to come to your home and take photographs of your child's empty bedroom and then share that with the world. And, at the time, my daughters were 2 and 6. And the idea of trying to do something around this issue really resonated with me. It's something I worry about and try not to think about, like most people, I think. And Steve showed me a photograph of one of the rooms they had started to photograph. And it was a picture of a toothpaste tube in a child's bathroom, and the cap was left off. And I looked at that picture and I immediately thought, okay, this could be something really different. This could be something powerful. You could feel the presence of the child, the sense that they were rushing to get ready for school and they didn't have time to put the cap back on, and they were like, I'll do that later. And they never came home. And I said to him, I think we should make a film. And his reaction was, okay, that's great, but I don't want to be in it. And I'm like, Steve, you have to be in the film. You're the perfect person to take us on this journey. You're someone people trust. You're someone who's not inherently political. And by following you, it's going to make it, I think, a little bit more inviting for viewers to go on what is a difficult journey. And he understood that. And he said, okay, I'll do it. And within about 2 months, we were on the road together using my credit cards to pay for the film, and just we decided to just go for it and try to do it. And now that was 3 years ago, and here we are.
It's such a beautiful film, and in terms of the choices you made as a director, focusing exclusively on the bedrooms, never showing us the shootings. Was that your approach from the beginning, or did it evolve in the shooting or in the edit? Were there moments you wanted to add in that you realized this was a stronger story the way you've told it?
Yeah, I mean, not only don't we show shootings or talk about the shooters, we don't even mention the word gun. So the word gun is never said in this film. And yeah, that was all very intentional. I think we get enough of that narrative when we watch the news, when we read articles about this, even when we watch other documentaries. And we made a conscious choice to solely focus on not just the children who aren't here anymore, but to just focus on their bedrooms and the belongings and objects and spaces that are left behind, and to sort of laser focus on that. That was an evolution. Initially we did have a little bit more in the film, and we learned things about the children that weren't related to their bedrooms. But over time, as we were in the edit, we found that the more we focused on the rooms and made it about that, and that was sort of an exercise we went through, was like, let's cut everything out except for when we're referring to the bedrooms. That, I think, made the film work better. And there's something really universal about those rooms. I think it's in their specificity. There's something that we can all relate to. All of us grew grew up in a child's bedroom, right? We were all kids. Some of us have kids and see these bedrooms. And there are objects in those rooms that my daughters have. There are objects in those rooms that I had. And there's just something so humanizing about a bedroom that I think goes far beyond what any headline or statistic could ever do to make you feel something again.
Yes. And you managed to compress roughly 7 years worth of school shootings with multiple families, multiple photographs into about 30 minutes. I wonder how you managed that feat and whether you considered a longer film or still want to do a longer one.
I don't think so. I think the short film is the right length for this subject, for this story. We thought about making a longer film. Our first cut was like 55 minutes or something, which is longer than a short film. Short is technically 40 and under. So it was like 55, and we were, you always have that thought, like, maybe this is a feature. And we were like, all you got to do is add like 20 minutes and you have a short feature. But what happened was we started to cut things out and tighten it and shorten it. And it just kept getting better. And then we got it down to like 34 minutes. And then we said, well, what else can we do to make it better? And then we started cutting out dialogue. And we did a pass where we cut out 6 minutes of dialogue in 34 minutes, but we kept the film at 34. So suddenly we had a film that had 6 extra minutes of silence in it that it didn't have before. And I thought it was working even better then, because it's a quiet film, and it's a film about absence. And
Hmm.
it's a film about giving
Grief.
people about grief and trying to
Yeah.
give people the experience of what it's like to be in those rooms. And when you go in the room, it's quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just opened it up, and I think it just started to work better. It started to feel I think you could start to feel the experience of what it's like to be in those rooms when we added that silence.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. As a director, so Steve Hartman comes to you with this letter idea, and you say this is a film, and now you say he needs to be in the film, and also Lou Bopp, another experienced journalist behind the camera, yet you're directing them and putting them in front of the camera. Did that pose challenges for you or for them, or were they fun to direct, or how did you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question because, in the case of Steve Hartman, I'm making a film about a person who's very experienced being in front of the camera. It's what he does every week on CBS News. And he has a persona that he has cultivated over more than 3 decades. And, I wasn't looking for that persona. I was looking for the real person. And initially, I think it was Steve's instinct. And I think he thought he was helping me to sort of like talk a lot, and to like explain what was going on and to sort of fill the space with words. And, even the way he interacted with the parents was like, I felt like he was trying to give me like edit points and, like interactions and I was just like, you know what? Pretend like we're not here. Don't worry about me. And you don't need to talk. You don't need to talk at all if you don't want to. And he just immediately understood. And you see in the film, he hardly talks at all. Like in the whole film, I would guess Steve talks for like, and he's like, you could argue is the main character in the film. I think in the whole film, he probably talks for like 2 minutes, maybe 2.5 minutes. And Lou probably talks for 1 minute. And these are the people we're following for the entire 34-minute journey. And they don't really speak, and they don't need to. I think you understand what they're doing, and I hope you understand what they're feeling just by
And you
looking
see
at them.
Yeah, you show them as very good fathers. You show them with their children. We get a sense of their journey, but also their homes and their family lives and where they're coming from emotionally. They both, like you, have so much compassion.
Yeah, I was very drawn to that part of the story. Seeing them as fathers, seeing the rituals they have with their kids was really important to me. I was just drawn to it. I have 2 girls, who are 5 and 9 now. I think I very much focused in on the father-daughter relationship with the two of them. But even with the families, there's a lot of, someone said to me, like, there's so many like really like sensitive, emotionally evolved men in this film. And I was
Yeah,
like, huh, yeah. And I think I was just drawn to that. It's
yeah.
something that interests me.
Yeah, I agree. It's a wonderful counter narrative to put forward when really so many of these school shootings, unfortunately, are done by young men, boys.
That's right. Yeah.
This is the counter. You probably had to negotiate with all of these families to allow you into their children's bedrooms. And I wonder whether they wanted more control or say in the shaping of the narrative or what access they gave you to their children's rooms or bathrooms or stories, or how did you manage all of those relationships? Because that was covered a lot of families.
Yeah, it's a good question. It started with the letter from Steve Hartman, where he wrote to the families. And once they said yes, which 8 families said yes, we explained to them what we wanted to do. And the way we explained it was to say, we want to try to capture who your child was through the room, through photographing the room. And we want to share that with the world. And that's all we want to do. And what was interesting is that every family that we worked with shared that same goal, that they want their child to be remembered. And their biggest fear is that their child will be forgotten. And so we shared this goal, which made it easier. And I think it built trust. And that's what sort of made it work, I think, is that they understood what we were trying to do. And the way we did it was like, with every family, we would come into the house, we would talk with them for a while. We had spoken with them on the phone prior a couple of times, so we knew them and they knew what to expect. And then we would go in the bedroom. Usually the parents they would bring us in, and then we would talk about things, and then they would leave and we would go back in with the camera and Lou would take pictures. And our crew was tiny. It was usually just one person. And then sometimes I was in the room, sometimes I was outside with a monitor, but we just kept it really small. And you can see Lou always took his shoes off before he went in the room. And then my team, we didn't use lights, we didn't use tripod, we didn't even use prime lenses because we never wanted to have to stop and change a lens and draw attention to the process of the filming. We just wanted it to be seamless and quick and low impact. And that was more important than, we'll get a better look from the prime lens. This film wasn't about that. I think it was, to us, it was about respecting the spaces and going in for a very brief time and trying to capture who the child was.
And you do that so well, and there's also this beautiful element of you don't only begin with the letters and then you're so respectful in how you treat the space and the family, but I think Steve Hartman put a book together of the photographs for every family you filmed with. That was a nice addition. It feels very much like you're memorializing the child and for the family and the world and giving something back to them from whom so much has been taken. There are really no words for it.
Yes, that was something that Steve did, which I thought was very beautiful, which is he and Lou took the photos from each room and curated a selection of them and put them into a picture book that they gave to each family. And the way that
Yeah.
Steve described it was that, you know, we came and we took their time, we took pictures, we needed to give something. And the book was his way of saying thank you to them. And what was interesting about that is, one of the families, the Muehlbergers, who are Brian and Cindy, their daughter was Gracie Muehlberger, and she's at the end of the film. She's the last child in Santa Clarita, and after Gracie was killed, they had wanted to move. They wanted to move to far away. They wanted to move to another state. They wanted to leave behind the bad memories and start a new life, but they couldn't bring themselves to do it because they didn't want to have to pack up the bedroom. So years went by where they just stayed put, and he would get job offers and they'd be in other states and he would turn them down because he couldn't leave. And
Mm.
finally, when Steve gave him the photo book and when they saw the film, they said, okay, we're ready. And
Wow.
they packed up the room and they've moved to another state now. And um,
Wow.
they have the photo book to remember the room, and they're building a garden at their new house that is to memorialize Gracie. So they have a new way of remembering her.
What a gift you gave them. You allowed them to move on. I mean, that's such a it's bringing tears to my eyes, but it's such a painful part of the process of grieving is that feeling frozen in time and not wanting to lose connection with the person you've been forced to lose. So that's very, very, very moving. What a gift you have given all these families. You want to share it all? You've spoken about reducing some of the dialogue in the film, but with music, you made a choice and you've said you don't like it to overly tell people how to feel.
Right.
What were
Yeah.
you thinking there?
Sure. Yeah, we worked with a composer named Alex Summers. Alex did the film Nickel Boys.
Yep.
Uh, Also did a film this year called, is it called The Tourist Family? Or I'm trying to remember. It's a Brendan Fraser film, and he's really amazingly talented. He's also affiliated with the band Sigur Rós, which is a great Icelandic band. I watched Nickel Boys when we were editing, and I think I called him the next day. I just said, wow, this music it sort of holds you without telling you what to feel, whether it be happy or sad or scared or anything. And that's what we wanted. We didn't ever want to tell people what to feel in this film, especially with this subject matter, because our instinct was as soon as someone feels like they're being told anything with this subject matter, it's game over. We just have to let people be in the rooms and have the experience of that and to make up their mind what they're going to feel and what maybe they want to do about it. And so when Alex started giving us the early versions of the tracks, it's funny. We just kept pulling back. We kept saying like, could you do a little less? Could you do even less? He would give us the stems, which are like the sort of the layers of the track and the pieces. And we would just pull pieces out and keep pulling them out until there was almost nothing left. And somehow in my feeling that worked the best was that minimalism and that just staying out of the way of the story, but giving it enough of a feeling that could hold the viewer without pushing them in any one direction.
It's very effective. Yes. It really complements the story. That's interesting, your process. On the impact front, you know, Steve has spoken about years of covering these school shootings left him numb. And in a way, we've seen films about shootings. And as you said, there are guns in so many of our stories and in the films that we're exposed to coming from the US right now. And I wonder whether you feel the film is having this impact where, Steve said he wanted to shock even himself back into feeling so that he wasn't numb to these shootings. And I imagine your experience as a director on the road with this film, you're finding audiences are very moved, but is it having the impact that you want in the way that you want it to, the way you've chosen to tell the story?
Yeah, I think we're trying to reach different audiences at the same time. There are people who I think probably agree with us and agree with our politics. And those people, I know for myself, like I've also felt numb to this issue. I felt like every time I read a headline, sometimes I wouldn't even read it past the headline because it's just so devastating and maddening that this continues. And I think there are people who share that feeling. And what we were hoping is that this film would make them feel the way they felt when they first heard about Sandy Hook or when they first heard about Uvalde, or maybe it was Columbine, those feelings we used to have when we heard about a school shooting where we felt like, whoa, this is not okay. This is not normal. We need to do something. And I think we've gotten to a place where a lot of us don't feel that anymore, where we've become resigned to it. We just say, oh, this is part of normal life. And it's not normal. And I think the film for some people getting them back to that place where when the film is over, they say, okay, what can I do? Tell me what to do. And that's been amazing because we've channeled them to all these amazing organizations that we partnered with, gun violence prevention groups. We're working with just about every major one, and they come to our screenings and events. We had a screening yesterday where 3 different organizations were represented there, and they're there to catch people after the screening and say, talk to me, I'll tell you what you can do to help. So we've done that. We've done fundraisers for the organizations by using the film and having screenings, and in some cases raised significant amounts of money in one night. There was one screening where I think we for the organization that was there, we raised over $1 million.
Wow.
So there's that part of it. But then there's the part where we want to speak to people who maybe don't agree with us. And, to me, the whole point of making this film, making films in general, honestly, is I don't just want to be preaching to the choir with my films. I just don't see the point of that. And in this case, that's why we made a film that doesn't mention the word gun in it. That's why we made a film that, as one person described it, as it's like the first film they've ever seen about gun violence that isn't angry. And, when they first said that to me, I was like, wait, is that bad? And they're like, no, it's good. And I was like, yeah, it's not angry. It allows space for all kinds of opinions and points of view, but it still delivers the same message, which is this is unacceptable. What's happening in our country with school shootings is unacceptable. And we can all agree on that. And maybe that is the place to start a new conversation. We had one screening where so what we did is we took the photographs from the film. There's over 10,000 photos that were taken. And we made
Wow.
a photo exhibit that's been traveling the country. And one of our early exhibits, it was in the Hamptons at the Hamptons Film Festival. And the gallery that was putting up the photos had a guy working there who was installing the photos. And turns out he was a very conservative guy who probably wouldn't have wanted to watch our film, but he was the guy tasked with hanging the photos. And he was known to wear this t-shirt that said, guns aren't stupid, people are. Anyway, this is the guy who's hanging the photos. And halfway through the day of putting them up, he was weeping, and he went up to his boss and he said, I need to go home. I can't do this anymore. So the guy goes home, and the next day when he comes back to work, he went up to his boss and he said, I will never wear that t-shirt again.
Wow.
And so hearing stories like that, where we know that we've on some level changed someone's mind,
Mhm.
was part of our hope with this film, was to
That's
speak to
huge.
people who don't agree and maybe to change their mind. And Steve Hartman got an email from someone who was a Sandy Hook denier who watched the film, sat through the whole thing, and told him that they had changed their mind too. So
Wow.
when we hear stories like that, it's very heartening to believe that a film like this and the stories that these parents have shared about their kids can have a positive impact on how people understand the issue.
Yes. Yes. And it's not left or right. And you get right to the core of it, which is the death of children. So beautifully said. Thank you so much for your time, Joshua. This is a perfect place to end. That was beautifully
Thanks.
said. And I'm
Thank
thrilled
you.
actually to hear the impact that your film is having. I didn't know that you were organizing screenings this way and working with all the gun violence prevention organizations, and the photographs are traveling. That's really fantastic.
Yeah, there's actually a photo exhibit in Los Angeles and New York right now that's outdoor public art, and
Okay.
it's there for everybody to see.
Well, we hope that those in New York will brave the blizzard to see the show, and in LA, you're much luckier with the weather. Don't miss it.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Vanessa.
Thank you. Thank you so much.